It's time to play in the shed again, so let's see what's going on today. There's a bit more lathe related action going on. I've got this tiny little oil pot that's really not big enough, but I've got this old aluminium catch can that I reckon I can repurpose, and I want to make an extension for the brush as well. The catch can's got a screw type bottom on it, and I'll use that as the lid, I think. But because I want a bit of a concave hole in that lid, I want to make that lid a bit thicker as well. But first I'll just make that brush handle extension. I've just got a little bit of 6mm aluminium rod here that just needs to be shaved down a tiny bit so that the brush pokes into it. Yep, that'll do nicely. A nice tight fit. This old catch can's a bit ordinary, and there's numbers of things that I need to clean up on it. And with the base screwed on, first of all I'm just going to part off the depth that I want, put the screw cap back on, and then clean that up as well. As I mentioned, I want the lid to be thicker, so I'm just going to trace around this bit of 10mm aluminium, and I'm going to weld that onto the lid. I've chamfered all the edges so that I can get some weld down into a nice big crack, so when I clean it up on the lathe there'll still be enough weld holding it together. So now that that extra thickness is welded onto the lid, I'll just clean that weld up on the lathe so it's nice and pretty. Next step is to drill a hole for the brush to go into. So a centre drill, then a couple of size drills till I get a brush size hole in the top. I want a concave in the top so that any oil that drips down from the brush when I use it will run back into the pot. So this is a simple matter of just putting the top slide on an angle, and a number of passes finally gets me to where I want it to be. But partway through I realised the angle was a bit too steep, so just changed that a bit. A few more passes and Bob's your uncle. Now, things always look nicer if they're nice and smooth. So just using a couple of different grits of sandpaper and then finally finishing it off with some steel wool, it looks like $100. Now, doesn't that look lovely? However, that lid is put on so tightly now with that lathe action that I can't undo the lid. So I have to drill a little hole in the side of it so I can put a little Tommy bar in to take the lid off. Didn't film that. Anyway, it's time to do the base. So I cut out another bit of scrap for the base and then weld that on as well. Now, I didn't realise it at the time, but here is where everything went to poo. Oh dear. The joys of an amateur in his shed, I guess. Because you see, I put the pot back in the lathe without putting the lid on. And you can guess what happened. Here I think I'm all finished, cleaning it up, ready to just do the final thing by putting the lid back on. And guess what happens? The lid won't screw on because, of course, I've squashed it in the jaws of the chuck. Oh dear. So it's right about now that I'm saying all sorts of rude words and kicking myself in the head. And I was so furious I didn't film it, but I had to cut the thing shorter and then single point thread the inside of it so that I had the lid able to screw on again. Still, it's still deep enough to hold a fair bit of oil. So things are not that bad now that I've finished it. You live and learn, I guess. And even though I'm only an amateur, I really should have known better. Anyway, the oil pot's complete. It's got a few dings and marks in it now because of the rework, but it's functional and it'll be fine for my purposes. So now I have a cutting oil pot, nice and handy, holds a reasonable amount, and it's nice and functional and looks sort of pretty as well. Another little shed job done.